Thanks for coming to Intuit, everybody. My name is Joel, the education coordinator here at Intuit. Definitely want to invite you again to check out our upcoming programs and encourage you to check out our membership, because we couldn't do these programs without our wonderful members. We'll have these available for you guys right here at the table, and you can ask any one of our lovely staff members about Intuit. And definitely, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Jeff Phillips, the curator of Lost and Found. He's a photographer. He's an advisor to Filter Photo Festival as well. He can tell you a little bit more about that, because we're in for a treat here. Behind the scenes look at Lost and Found, the search for Harriet Edna. So Jeff, take it away.
Thanks for coming out. Like Joel said, my name is Jeff Phillips. I'm going to tell you a little bit tonight about the Lost and Found project, and I'm going to start from the beginning and tell you the whole story, but what I really want to do tonight is to share the parts of the story that I couldn't fit into the exhibition, or that would be too confusing or too distracting from the main message. So we'll spend some time doing that. Now, I think you'll really dig this, because you are, after all, at a gallery talk on a Thursday night when it's super nice outside, so I think you're my kind of peeps. That's cool. Like Joel said, I'm a photographer. I've been making photographs since I was a teenager. I help produce a Filter Photo Festival in the fall of each year. Dirk Fletcher's here. He's the president of Filter, actually. You've got to check that out. I'm actively involved in the contemporary photography community in Chicago, in our city, and I think about photography a whole lot. The other side, when I'm not thinking about photography, which is not very often, I'm a social collaboration consultant, so I work for a firm in the city, and I help large organizations use social technology to employees to collaborate better with each other. So this is really an intersection of two of my passions, which is photography and social technology. This all started out as a simple social media experiment about 3 years ago, and turned into something much more interesting, I think. I'm going to start by asking a question. How many of you here made a photograph today with a mobile device or a camera? Raise your hand. How many in the last week? Yeah, more. How many of you printed a photograph in the last week? Oh, well, look at this. This is the first time I've ever had more than 3 people. You ruined my joke. That's great. Normally it's nobody, and I can do the wah-wah thing, the death of print. But we'll talk more about that, and I'll explain why I asked that question shortly. I'm going to start, though, by admitting that I'm obsessed with collecting found photographs. Found photography is sometimes lumped in with a vernacular photography bucket, or it's used to describe images that have a snapshot aesthetic. Regardless, in my opinion, they're a legitimate, or at least a popular, genre of contemporary photography. You find these by the hundreds at estate sales, thrift stores, antique malls. Here's a couple of examples: a man with a gun and a plan, and a dude sharing a cold beer and a warm pipe with his newborn. The best ones, to me, are completely unexplainable. They border on the surreal, and the original intent is usually only known, of course, to the subject, and in this case, her photographer. Some of them appear to be lucky accidents, which make them more mysterious and interesting to me. My favorite found images are just of regular families doing everyday family stuff, jockeying for the best position behind the punch bowl, or the ones that capture what we do as a culture, such as this portrait of an entire team of middle-aged bowlers just proudly displaying their, well, you finish that sentence. So if we remove these images from their original context, that's to me when the magic happens. That's when the viewer is free to interpret that image any way they feel, and that's when the interesting things occur. As a collector of found photographs, once in a great while does something wonderful happen, and about 3 years ago, I found something really special. I discovered more than 1,000 slides, almost 1,100 unmarked slides in some funky smelling boxes in a junk store. Anybody here remember slides? Yeah? Anybody been stuck in slideshow hell before? Yeah. Is it right now? Good. Okay, we're going. All right. So on this particular day, I found this 30 boxes of slides in an antique mall. And the very first slide I pulled out of that box, to me, was astounding. It was a woman wearing a bright pink ball gown. She was standing center frame against a field of green trees under a bright blue sky. This is signature Kodachrome film. It's a legendary film that's known for its sharpness and its saturation, and most importantly, for this project, its permanence. This stuff lasts forever. And I could only hope at that moment as a collector that somewhere in this pile of 1,000, 1,100 images that there was maybe 2 or 3 more that were as cool as this. So as I went through and pulled them out one by one, there was more and more. One woman photographed the same way, posed in a yellow dress and then a blue dress. And then right there in the store, I swear, I laughed out loud when I saw her just busting out in a life jacket on the deck of a ship. There were many more photographs like this. They were taken all around the world in front of landmarks and tourist attractions and road signs and other important places that at the time were still wild American frontiers, places like Hawaii and Alaska, for example. She was almost always centered in the frame, and if you're into photography, I'm sure you've noticed by now there's some pretty wacky and strict rules of composition going on in these photographs. There were photographs of a man too, but he was in different places and the two of them were hardly ever seen together. He was often photographed with large groups of women. I had no idea what was up with that. I did admire his mojo, and I thought maybe it's the ice cream, the trick for me to try. There were rare instances where they were photographed together, and in this large collection of photographs, that's mostly what it was, them photographing each other. There were rare instances where they were together and they were shot up close and personal like this, and some not so close and personal. And then some even not so close. There's a trend going on here, and then, oh, wait, there she is. They proudly photographed themselves everywhere, in front of hotels, motels, any place they went. It was like they were staking their claim. They were there, they were showing everybody where they'd been. Motels, hotels, this is, I don't know about you, but I have memories of these kinds of shady places from my childhood, traveling across the West on Route 66. The man was spotted over and over again, just about to walk into a building, but he couldn't make the commitment. And I'm not really sure why. To this day, nobody knows. And you can see here that it happens dozens and dozens of times. And here he's on the left. He's about to go in.
If he was inside, you wouldn't see him.
Good point. All those other photographs of the buildings, he actually couldn't. Another repeating practice was he photographed her, she photographed him. Again and again, over and over again, wherever they went. Of course, by then, I realized that I'd stumbled across a travelogue of an unidentified couple who traveled the country and really the world during the prosperous post-war years in the 1950s, and they photographed each other along the way. And like all these images that I've found over the years, I just basically want to know one thing, and it's why are these family photographs, these private, historic, personal records completely abandoned at some point in time? So the question is, where are these people today? I wondered about doing an experiment where I would post one image per day on a social media property, Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and I wanted to know how long it would take until somebody spotted a relative in their activity stream some morning when they're drinking their coffee. Oh, that's Mom, kind of a thing. So I created a Facebook page called Is This Your Mother? And I began posting one image per day. I uploaded the first image and I seeded it by asking 3 of my friends to like it on Facebook, and then I let it run. I wanted it to grow organically, personal network to personal network. I didn't want to influence it in any way. And before long, a couple of hundred people connected to started following the page, and they came to the site from all over the world and all over the country, but very few people from the city where I found the images. And so I thought that would initially reduce my chances of success without that local audience of people in a community who had lived somewhere for a long time looking at images. People began commenting on the images right away, and it was really funny at first. They were commenting about their clothing, or they noted the woman, how she always sunbathes in hose, and how sensible her shoes were, and all kinds of interesting stuff. This commenter here even gives a shout out to Homer. The followers of the page sent me emails. They were asking me to do Zoom ups and hoping that they'd see something that would give away a clue to the location or the time period or the country or just their reason for being in a particular place. A lot of the Zoom ups didn't provide much data or much research or much clues, but they were not short of laughs. So every day I was posting an image, and I had about 3 years worth of material. Their once private lives started to kind of unfurl. People started to see that there was a family here. There was more than just the two of them. And suddenly the mood changed. It went from all the making fun and this light mockery of what they were doing and creating false pretend scenes and dialogue and so forth. It became more purposeful and more serious. And almost like a social media search party had begun to emerge at this point. They started looking for hidden clues within the photographs and diligently searching for information within the photographs and cross-referencing and then sharing their ideas and theories about the couple on the Facebook page. So that included scouring genealogy databases, census records. They speculated about the couple's names, their hometowns, their location, and their occupations that might have afforded them this kind of travel. And this is why found photography is interesting to me. It's because the images become little Rorschach tests. They reveal our own perceptual processes and our lifelong assumptions and prejudices and stereotypes that we hold become really immediately visible when you're posting on Facebook, and they're imprinted on that Facebook wall. And this particular commenter says they must have been well off to do so much traveling without knowing really anything about the couple. Another thing that was interesting was a lot of people were certain they knew the exact location of a photograph when it was made. This happened over and over again. Usually it was connected to some memory of a childhood vacation or something, almost consistently. And here you see a portrait of the woman, and she's standing against a backdrop of some palm trees, and there's coconuts back there and stuff. And somebody declares, "This is Wisconsin Dells." I'm like, those are coconuts. One woman wrote, "I have no children, and I have often wondered if anyone will ever care that I was here on planet Earth. I can relate to Ed." Now keep in mind that there was no information about whether or not Ed had children, whether she wanted to have children and couldn't have children, or didn't like children at all. This is just another example of an interesting interpretation of a photograph without context. But I already knew that they didn't have kids because the giveaway was that they were traveling. So the comments really reveal far more about the authors than the subjects. In this case, of course, it's one of my favorites. 3 men sitting uncomfortably close together on a couch, and the commenter writes, "That fella in the middle has a secret." So, as I posted an image per day, a couple of weeks in, I began to think about how slim the chances were that I would actually ever find the identities of this couple. There are hundreds of ways we can share photographs today, Flickr, Tumblr, Instagram, the list goes on and on and on. But I want to stop for a minute, just focus and limit our scope to Facebook and talk about that. Facebook currently stores 250 billion images, and that works out to be about 4,000 photo uploads per second every minute of every hour of every day. And with all this digital noise, I thought it would take years, 5 years, 10 years. There's no formula that I could find to calculate that. 5 to 10 years worth of likes before somebody recognized their mother, if it even happened at all. And so the next obvious question is, how long did it take? And well, nobody actually saw their mother, but the mystery was solved in about 3 weeks. What happened was people diligently searched for those clues. They, again, shared dozens and dozens of ideas and theories, some of those canceling out others, opening new doors, or creating new questions. But what it really came down to was information that's embedded in these images. So in the lower left side here of this image is a vase, and it has a flag with a logo of an M. And on the table was a menu, which also had that logo. And there was a woman who looked at this image, and she remembered a story her mother had told her, and had brought a menu home from a trip she took on a ship called the Matsonia, about decades ago, 30 or 40 years ago. And she had told her about this, and this woman connected that memory of that menu and that flag to this story her mother told her about the Matsonia. And that Matsonia, that one word opened up a ton of doors in terms of finding out information of when it cruised and getting passenger manifests, and there was all kinds of information in that one piece of, that one photograph, that one corner of a photograph. But it was a woman in Seattle named Jennifer. She made the actual final connection. She triangulated some of the clues in the images and the location and the dates and the name of the ship, like I just described. And she came up with a few possibilities. And then I think about 2 in the morning, she's in Seattle, so it would have been earlier, she sent me an email about 3 weeks into this project, and she said that Harry August Grossman and Edna Annette Lair. Edna died in 1983, and Edna passed away 3 years later. So their names were Harry and Edna Grossman. We figured that out. Harry and Edna, to me, that was like the most perfect names you could have for people that look like this in these photographs. They lived their lives in St. Louis together. They were born at the turn of the century. They had no children. They died in the 1980s within 3 years of each other, and that's when their family photographs were set adrift. So soon the remaining family was tracked down. I didn't do it. The people on the Facebook page went out and actually did that for me. Thank you very much. I only have 985 more Kodachromes to post. They did that through Facebook, of course, and so the family came and began following the page as well. They filled in gaps. They corrected our wild, incorrect speculations that we've been making over the few weeks, told stories that became part of that social community. And the most common question that I get asked about this show is, what did the family say about what I did? And honestly, I thought through the legal implications of appropriating images for projects and for other work. It's well-trodden ground, so I knew my rights there. But it wasn't until that moment that I first talked to them on the phone that I realized that what I was doing could have been inappropriate, disrespectful, or worse. Had I done the right thing? That was a big question. I believe I have the answer for that. They were very supportive and loved the idea that Harry and Edna would continue to travel. The second most common question is, why were those photographs thrown away in the first place? So, in my opinion, these photographs were almost lost forever, because slide film as a format became obsolete. When these were sold at an estate sale years ago, there was no longer a way to view them. There was no projector available that day, and it's not practical to look at 1,100 slides by holding one up to the sun every time. So I got to thinking about how dramatically photography has changed over the decades and how technology has improved it so much. And then I stopped and said, or has it? At this point, what we've done so far in this project is found a cache of Kodachrome slides that surely would have been lost forever. We introduced them into the social realm. We observed a community of people grow to love the images and the anonymous couple. We saw how people reacted to the imagery and fearlessly posted their interpretations in a public forum. We watched them make it their mission to restore the identities of this couple, and then we connected with the families. For most audiences that see this show, the story is the most interesting part. But I suspect that this is what's really interesting to me. This is where the interesting stuff begins. So as a photographer, a collector of found photographs, and now an amateur sociologist, this is where the good stuff starts. And so I want to take just a few minutes more to talk about some other kinds of experiences from this project that typically don't get addressed in the show or didn't make it into the show. There's a lot of layers to this onion. So photography and tech, as I mentioned, 2 parts of my life. They intersect again in subtle ways, and I found these interesting, and I'll just share them. I'll just jump in. So we had a community of people worked together collaboratively to discover the identities of a couple that they didn't know and shouldn't have cared about. And were really engaged even after the mystery was solved, which was amazing because I thought it was done after 3 weeks because once people knew who they were, it wouldn't be interesting anymore. Well, that's not the case. They stuck around. So I decided to, when I thought of doing this show, I thought, well, I'm going to curate this, but I'm going to involve the people who helped find Harriet. And so in that same social space on Facebook, on that same page, I created a poll with some non-leading questions asking things like what photo captures the spirit of their road trips, or if you could be a fly on the wall, which of these events would you choose to be at? And through that, I was able to allow the Facebook community, the This Is Your Mother community, to help curate the actual show that you see out there. I thought that interesting. I think that idea was interesting to involve those folks that spent so much time contributing to the actual project, because their comments, their input, their interpretations are also part of the show. I printed these images in large format as they would have appeared when they were projected back in the day. I used Latitude, which is a local community lab. You print stuff yourself there, but it's amazing. You should check it out sometime. Expert staff. It's just a great place to work, and it doesn't cost $1 billion. David Gilmore, who's a professor emeritus of photography at SIU Carbondale, gave me some great advice when I was contemplating how I was going to present the show. And he said, you can't frame these. If you frame them, you're implying or declaring that they're pieces of art, or works of art. And they're not. They're windows into somebody's lives in the 1950s when they traveled around. So that's why you see them kind of face mounted against the acrylic with the original Kodachrome borders around the edges, is that the idea is that they would appear to be projected as you would have seen them in the 50s. I have an old school projector out there and of course an iPad. The idea is to draw comparisons and to ask people to consider how we create, consume, and share photography today differently than we did 60 years ago, and to think about our own digital preservation habits today in a different world. The comments were included because I felt like the images themselves were superb snapshots, but that's really all they were. And the idea with the show is it's not chronological. As we all know how Facebook works, I posted the first image and received some comments. We move down the line every day, but people are still seeing the first and still making comments. So it's not a chronological show, but it's really just the idea of bringing that dynamic Facebook wall to a static gallery wall and freezing or preserving that digital environment for the length of the show. Here's a couple of things that are interesting too, I think at least. During that process of doing the search, people were searching everywhere and gathering all kinds of information. And somebody came across something for sale on eBay. It was a small set of documents, travel documents. It was a travel agency in 1957, Albertson Travel, Architects of Pleasure, their slogan. They did this mass mailing that targeted the Shriners organization, and it was in 1957. It was an invitation to join a pilgrimage to paradise, a trip to Hawaii from San Francisco, on the newly christened Matsonia, which would sail for the first time in 1958. Well, included in this auction on eBay, which I bought for $6, was a travel brochure. It was a threefold kind of thing, and inside of that, it had a description of what you would be doing if you bought a ticket to this cruise and you got to Hawaii. This is what you would do every day for the length of the stay. And of course, seeing this was very exciting because I remembered I had a box of one of the Kodachrome boxes, which I hadn't gotten to yet, which all it said on the outside in pencil was Hawaii. Another connection there. And here's Tuesday, April 15th, 1958, or proposed. The most important part is immediately upon arrival, cars will leave for an interesting drive into famed Hawaii National Park and the crater of Kilauea volcano. Drive by car. And the first slide I pulled out of that box was a shot over the hood of a car driving across that very plains and on the way to the volcano. So what I had was captions, metadata about images that were made 60 years ago, and they matched up one by one. So we had a day's worth of images for each of those paragraphs in that travel brochure, and I thought it was pretty cool. Now another thing, this is where the nerd/geek comes out. I'm interested in the clues that exist in these photographs, and here, this is a really obvious one. We've got 3 distances, which means I can triangulate that and figure out exactly where she's standing. And wouldn't it be cool to see what is there today? There's street photography is not new. There's books everywhere where people go, recreate a historic photograph, try to find the exact same spot that the photographer was standing at, using the same focal length and same field of view and so forth. So it's not new, but this time I didn't have to make the travel and carry all the gear. I just used Google Street View. But it's really, really fascinating to me when you see the difference. You know, here's today, okay? So you go, oh, who cares, no big deal. But I really believe this connects to where would you rather live? I mean, what era would you rather live in? I mean, for me, it would be that, right? And I think this says something about our love of Instagram filters, for example, where this is the reality of that place. Now, yes, it's a different season and so forth. Same goes with this shot of San Francisco when they were on their way to port to go to Hawaii. That's the today view. But Kodachrome inherently has that color palette, or that ability to reproduce colors in that special way, and I thought that was interesting. Now lastly, I call this segment of the experiment the untruth in advertising. Because during the search, another thing that came up were a lot of old ads, and the Matsonia, the Matson line was the company that had the Matsonia ships. There's 2 of them, the Lower Line and the Matsonia. And they were just, you know, the Matsonia was, as I said earlier, nearly christened. So they were advertising like crazy in leisure magazines and lifestyle magazines about this new ship that was going to be sailing. And so this is the illustrations that were included in the ads in the day. And I've been told as a member of Generation X, although I hate to group people together into, you know, by age group or by segment, but supposedly I have a mistrust of authority, Generation Xers do, and are afraid to be manipulated by media and marketers. But I really thought this was interesting because that's okay, take a look at the image on the left. You've got the man and the woman. Notice the couple in the back wearing the Hawaiian leis, and they're leaving San Francisco. That's even what the text says. The text on the actual travel brochure that I told you about before says, at 4:00 p.m. the great liner will slip away from the pier amid songs of the islands and showers of serpentine, heading out through the Golden Gate into the tranquil waters of the Blue Pacific. The reality of that is that. Because that's San Francisco Pier in the background. That's there's another one. I mean, they're doing the same thing. She's got her arm up, she's got her arm up. It's just a different arm. And lastly, party full of balloons. Everybody have a good time. White tux, black tie. Oh, there's the white tux and black tie. So drawing these comparisons to me was fascinating, not only just to see what's changed or how it was marketed and what the reality was. But I'll leave you with one final thought, and that is the reason for the question I asked you at the beginning of this, which didn't go the way I planned with this group, about printing a photograph, is that generally speaking, we're printing less frequently, and as we upgrade our phones to the next model, or the standards for storage change, or social media services appear, evolve, or disappear, think MySpace, for example, I fear that we're not really planning for an obsolescence that's almost certain. So in 50 years, the question is, what will remain as a record of our lives? Will it be findable at all? In the future, which corporation will own the content that can prove your existence? I don't know, nobody reads the end user license agreements before you sign up for a service, but there's a lot of interesting information in there that basically says you're guaranteed anything when it comes to those images. Certainly not the ownership of it, but not even that, the permanence of it. And how are you going to ensure access of the images you create today for future generations? Now, I'm not anti-digital, digital has done so much for our beloved photography. I can't imagine how it would be without it. But I do believe we need to start thinking about the future accessibility of our images and start making albums or printing photo books again, or even if it's just once in a great while. And my main assertion with this project is that the images that you did make today or in the last week with your camera or your mobile device, which don't have any physical form in our digital world, are likely to meet the same fate as Harry's obsolete slides. Oh, there's one more thing. The cutout. So every time, what we're doing in the show is we have this cutout of Edna, and we want people to photograph themselves with her and tweet that or post it or do an Instagram deal. And we want to kind of complete that circle and in some way allow her figuratively to travel once again. So thank you very much.
We can open up to questions for another 15 minutes or so.
I have two questions. One, how did you end up finding the auction on eBay? That's like a...
It's never happened since. So it wasn't me. It was a group of the people on Facebook were searching for clues, and somebody saw that M. Madsonia flag, so they searched Google, they used Google.
And they just found, and that's what got them back to the Facebook, or to the eBay auction.
Google surfaces the eBay stuff too, oftentimes, and so they search for Madsonia.
Right.
And there's a whole subculture of people that collect ephemera like that.
Right.
Old travel documents, Kodachromes now, people buy them in bulk and sell them for $5 each on eBay.
Right.
And so anyway, that stuff does come back, and the Madsonia came up, and I haven't seen anything since. So it was really a strange
That is a
coincidence.
Yeah, really cool.
that was
And
available
then what
then.
did they do for a living?
They started a sheet metal company in St. Louis, and they were affluent because they were self-employed. She was the bookkeeper and he was the owner, and they grew that business pretty well and did really well. The strange part was, as I mentioned earlier, as a consultant, I've been doing that for years. I used to live in St. Louis, and I worked at this company called Murphy Mechanical Contractors as a consultant for a while. And Harry's uncle was an executive there while I worked there. It's not that big of a deal, but it is another one of those things you're like, whoa. Yes?
I find it really surprising that it wasn't much easier to determine where they lived from text around than in pictures. Maybe it's that maybe this was a different era when we didn't print words on everything, but I would think you'd see what do you call those little flags, or a pennant on the wall or something. Did it surprise you that you couldn't find them by a sign that said something St. Louis?
Yeah, there was the problem wasn't that, so there were, one thing we couldn't use was, there weren't very many, right away you look for license plates, right?
Yeah.
You look for cars with license plates. And it was basically devoid of that. There were cars everywhere, but you couldn't see the license plates. You could identify the region as maybe Midwestern or Southern, but there wasn't any landmarks. They would travel a lot, and that was part of the problem. So there was Indianapolis in there was Springfield, Missouri, there were a few clues, but you didn't know if they lived there. I mean, it was all over the country, and not to mention internationally. And so the idea was, well, I found these in St. Louis, so that would be the starting point. That made sense. But there were more photographs of other places than there were of St. Louis, or I couldn't even tell if they were in St. Louis. And so, yeah, it's a good point, a good question, because thinking back now, we had no clues, and he didn't write on the slide mounts like a lot of people would do with the pencil. There was a thumbprint on one, which I thought was pretty cool.
Well, I also think, to that point, they were really making tourist pictures. It's not as if they were photographing themselves at home or in their own, you know, and so that then goes to Sontag and we take the picture to say we were there.
Right,
So they didn't have to show that they were home, right?
that's true.
So,
Yeah.
As like a found photograph collector, did you like, I know for me personally, when I collect found photographs, because I have, oh my, thousands of them, I love that I don't know who these people are. Like that brings me some kind of joy that I
Yes.
just keep all these creepy dead old people in my house. Like I absolutely love it. My parents look at me like I have 3 faces. But like, did you feel like when you did discover them, did you like love them a little less or love them more? Like how is that relationship between like you personally as a collector between finding out who they are and not finding them?
What was really intoxicating was the mystery. Okay,
Yeah.
so you don't know who they are. You're opening boxes of Kodachromes and they're just great. You know what I mean? The images are funny and you're laughing your butt off and you're looking at them on a light table and you know so the fact that in 3 weeks' time that the mystery was solved, honestly speaking, it was a bit of a bummer because I had, like I said, 1,100 slides, so I had over 1,000 more that I was banking on posting, keeping this going. But to answer your question more directly, I don't think I felt any less about the characters in photographs. I realized there was a new set of responsibilities I had when the family came into the picture. They've been great, and I don't want to imply that anything different, but now it wasn't the same as them being unknown. The family was there, and I had a responsibility now. I worried about things that I didn't before, like what people were going to say about the photographs in the Facebook page. Should I lock it down? Should I not? Which is a ridiculous idea. All because of that. What you're saying is that when you know who they are, the picture does change.
Right, that meaning change. Like,
Yes,
I collect photo albums and like scrapbook albums, and where they do handwrite everything. Like, this is Bob next to Fred, and he was born on the Tuesday at 1 a.m.
Exactly.
You know, but like, I don't know. I kind of enjoy not knowing them, so I feel like that's an interesting quality to me.
I think that's a great point. I agree. Yes?
It's more of a comment than anything else. These photos, they remind me of like the neighbors I used to have growing up. I grew up in Belmont Craig, and it's like a few miles west of here, and you know, I moved into a Polish neighborhood as I was a kid, and a lot of my neighbors look like that.
Yeah.
And it just took me back to my childhood of growing up with these people, you know, like, I mean, down to the T. And they looked like that till the day they passed away. And even just like them, their family members just got rid of their possessions like that. And I felt terrible about it. They weren't even my family. And I felt terrible that, you know, somebody could just get rid of everything like that. And I think it's cool that, you know, people such as yourself or you know, go around and collecting stuff like this to share with others. Aside from that, I'm really attracted to the cars. I love the 50s era. I love the, you know, hot rod culture. And, you know, I just think it's awesome that you guys did this. I think it's awesome that all you guys came out here on Thursday.
So much.
So that's just my comment on that.
You know, Harry and Edna didn't have any children, so who were they taking these pictures for? You know, obviously, really us. I mean, somebody didn't care about them. They put them in an estate sale. If they'd had children, they wouldn't have sold the pictures. So they come to us. We now love Harry and Edna. And, you know, it makes me want to, if they were my photographs, go into a genealogical, I mean, completely opposite of what you're saying. I would do a whole genealogical search, because obviously Harry and Edna were probably Jewish. We probably know that from their last names. They probably were. So you could go into all types of, you know, different types of genealogical, you know, backgrounds and study, and find out where they came from and who they were. And it's sort of like now all of us who are looking at their photographs and we care about them are sort of their progeny in a way.
It's interesting what you said, because they were Shriners, and so they did.
Well.
So they did a lot of. The reason I tell you that is because the Shriners got wind of the show. When it was in St. Louis, and they keep very accurate records. And so they came forth to the opening night the first time the show ran, and brought his original applications and his membership card and all this stuff. And they wanted to fill in all these gaps too and tell me the story, tell me more about Harry and Edna. The family, all great nephews and great nieces mostly, have come to the shows. And they've also brought stories. And they want to tell me who every person is in every image. And to Lauren's point, that's not necessary for me. You know what I mean? It's almost TMI. It's almost like, you know what I mean? But I putting myself in their shoes, I completely respect and understand why they'd want us to know that about Harry. But we, I think, at least I do, have my own relationship with Harry. And I don't need the augmented information to fill that out.
Aside from being interesting for the reasons we've been talking about because of the mystery and so on, do you think Harry and Edna were do you think the pictures are particularly well done or particularly interesting, or do you think they're roughly as interesting as the travel photo snapshots that their neighbors and other people, their contemporaries made? You see what I'm getting at?
Yes.
The first picture you showed us, to me, I think this was made by a genius. You know what I mean?
No, I agree.
But do you think there's something to that, or do you think that's us? It's our imagination.
My fantasy is Harry was like I was as a teenager, sitting in his room reading Popular Photography. Popular Photography magazine was telling me what I need to do when I compose a photograph. And I did what Popular Photography told me to do. And I think that Harry, for some reason, liked to pose his subjects dead center. Every image that he made, they were dead center, almost always dead center of the frame. Or the matter if it's horizontal or vertical. And the ones that Edna took of him were out of focus and tilted. So I think that there's a whole, if we had more time, I mean, there's so many more photographs here. There's an entire box of photographs of windows, looking out of windows from inside hotel rooms that they were in. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. And I thought, maybe that's genius. What he's doing is he's taking a picture of the scenery outside the window, but he wants to give us the experience of what it's like to be in the room looking through the window. And I thought, maybe he's just lazy. He doesn't want to go outside. It's too hot outside or something. Who knows? But that's me interpreting the found photograph and saying, this guy's really genius. I thought the images, I don't know what makes them funny. I know that the younger the person is that looks at the image, and I hate to generalize, but I will. The people come in, the younger they are, the kids think it's hilarious. They don't connect with anything. The older guys, the older women, they come in and they're like, hey, my dad had that car. You know what I mean? So I don't know if I answered your question or not. I think the photographs, I think he was an advanced amateur, and I think he read about photography. I think he had a fine camera. Knowing what I know about the age of the photographs, it's probably a rangefinder. I don't know what brand or anything. I've looked through every slide I could under a loop looking for reflections in mirrors to see. When I'm saying this, it sounds way creepier than that.
No, I love it. Bring on the creepiness.
Like trying to see in mirrors and stuff, like what he was shooting with and all that stuff, but couldn't tell you any more than that. Yes?
I just have a question about the copyright.
Yes.
You didn't take them, but
Correct.
how exactly is that?
So that discussion, I was at SPE earlier in the year's conference, and it was about, the conference was called Is This Photography? And a lot of people that were there were appropriators. And actually, I hadn't heard that word, surprisingly. And it was in an elevator, and somebody said to me, are you an appropriator too? And I'm like, first you have to tell me if it's legal, and then I'll say yes or no. But I didn't know what that meant in the context of found photography, but I learned a lot. And it's much like street photography, and that is under the umbrella of contemporary or fine art, you have a lot of protection. Now, I'm not selling shoes or soda with these photographs. And my legal rights is well-trodden ground, as I mentioned earlier, but knowing that doesn't mean that the family's not going to be sensitive to that, or they're not going to be concerned. And in fact, one of the family members is an attorney, and she was the second person I talked to here in Chicago. She's like, well, when we heard about it, we thought it was great, but then we wondered if it was legal or not. And I thought, okay, I know what's happening, and I'm going to be proactive about it, like I would be with anybody. this photograph that I have that I want to use, and tell them, you have access to these. I'm going to make a book for you. I'm going to make a DVD with all of these images. And I'm going to spend the money and make the investment to scan 1,100 images, and then we'll look at them together and have a shared experience. And look at all the nice things, all the enjoyment it's bringing to the people that are in this Facebook community, and it was all good after that. So that was a kind of a work around your question. Legally, I know where I'm at. If I had to get hardcore about it, I have every right to have these images, and they don't, but that's not the way that I approached it. Yes, I'm sorry.
Some did go out of their way to kind of sell them. So, I mean, one of the family members did go out
They
of their way
did,
to sell
yeah.
them.
You know what it
and
sold
estate
for?
sale.
I'm sorry?
Do you know what the price of all the slides sold for?
It was sold in one of those to one of those estate sale companies that comes in and for a fixed price or something sells the stuff, and anything that's left they take it. So I don't know what the value. I paid $60 for 30 boxes of slides. That's $2 a box. Sorry, there was one.
Just,
Behind you.
Book?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
you, sorry.
Um,
I have another question.
I have a few questions that are like all in the same
Okay.
bubble. So I'm curious if you looked at every single slide and if you found like a clear or somewhat clear first or, and last chronological order, and if you, either in this collection or through the family, seen any photographs of them as a younger couple, or like when this started for them, when they started wanting to photograph each other and go on these trips.
These pictures were a 10-year range from 1948 to 1958. There was a couple in there from 1962. She's standing somewhere in Florida. What's the name of that resort? Anyway.
Oh, Kiss them or Wiki Wachi or wait,
It
I
was,
saw one. I saw the slide.
Yeah. I don't know why
Yeah.
it's not coming to me
Wiki
now.
Wachi.
But there was a 10-year range, and I thought that was strange too. But one of the things that came up was there was a cake they had which had a 10 on it, and then there was a cake where they looked older and had a 20 on it. We assumed that was a anniversary, wedding anniversary. And so it turns out, after talking to the family, when we figured out who they were, that there are thousands more slides they didn't sell. So and they were like, "You want those?"
Sorry.
This is fine. Wait, this Sorry.
Book? Like, where do you see this going? Do you have plans for this kind of collection or this project?
I was skeptical. I've been skeptical about it. How interesting it would be as a book. I've changed my mind about it lately. If it could be something that was inexpensive for people to have, I would totally do it. Book publishing, which is a big discussion point at Filter this year, is the books are great unless they cost $80 for somebody to buy. And with Blurb and some of the other on-demand printing services now, it's a little difficult to produce a book that really you want people to have and enjoy, but you don't want them to have to pay $80 for it. So that's what I would like to do. And there are a lot of overseas printers. I know here at Intuit they have some vendors that work overseas that really do a great job, and the quality is great, and it's not that much.
What was the name of the printer you used again? Were they in town?
Yeah, Latitude is actually it's not a collective, it's a community organization, not for profit. And it's a loft space, it's been around for several years now, and you basically join as a member and you have access to amazing printers, drum scanners, experts. They're all, photographers and artists. And then they have critiques there, and they have, artist talks and so forth.
But traditional printing, not digital printing.
No, digital.
Digital printing.
It's all digital.
It's all inkjet. They have a 64-inch Epson, which I used for some of these because I print two up. 64-inch wide printer. I think they had two of them at the time. Maybe they had retired one. And then a ton of 48s and a bunch of 24s. And it's really economical. I have two 24-inch printers in my condo. One's black and white, one digital color. And it still made more sense to go to them. And then you have that community of people that's hanging out. They're hanging out, looking at work and printing, and So I would look them up. It's latitudechicago.com. I don't have any relationship with them economically, but Pepper Kelly, who runs that, is also director of Filter Photo Festival. So, yeah. Oh, Charlotte and Lauren too. Two other fantastic filter for us. Too many F's.
Well, I was doing this, but I also was busy.
Okay, sorry.
I was just thinking about how you're talking about finding, the coordinates of where where the photos were taken. I think that's really interesting, especially based between, there are a lot of different landscapes there, and then some of them are actually kind of hopefully permanent because they were visiting places like out west and in parks like the volcanoes and things like that. And I just think that it's interesting to be comparing like the boat, and their cruises.
I don't know why I'm fascinated with that, but I do. I like to go, like, in those photographs where there were signs, say the Smoky Mountains or something, or an overlook or something, I go Google and try to find that same spot they were standing. I have no explanation for that, why I think that's interesting. To be able to look at a photograph from 60 years ago of a sign and look at the today one and get satisfaction on the fact that that sign is still there, or the sign's different, or...
Because the idea of permanence is soothing somehow.
That must be.
Because I think
That just
that's
must be
part of why,
continuity.
yeah, that's why everybody likes this project. It's like the idea of being remembered after you're gone too.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah, like something wasn't fleeting.
Right.
Some one day.
even those rocks.
I love what social media and what digital technology has done for us as artists and photographers. The ability for us to learn so quickly. Instead of waiting a week to get my roll of film back and seeing what I screwed up and looking at my notebook, I can learn right away. I mean, it's such an amazing time for photography. So it's not about a digital thing. Social media is awesome too. Look at the way we can promote ourselves. We can connect with other photographers. We can meet people in an instant and have great conversations. It's a fantastic time for photography. So I always say that because I don't imply like one of those old dudes is like, digital sucks, man. Back in the day when you should shoot Tri-X and it's not that at all.
But it is a little bit.
Yes.
I just have one more question. So I know you're a photographer and you want to keep shooting, but at the same time, does this become like a hobby for you? And do you want to go back to places where you can find old negatives and see what you could make out of it?
I still keep looking for stuff. I stop whenever I see it's convenient. I see an antique mall or a shop or a junk store or whatever, a thrift store. I'll go in and look. But there's a lot of collectors, a lot of people out there, especially after the Vivian Maier find right now. Everybody's looking for that next deal. And so it's harder and harder. Lauren, you're a huge collector of this stuff. And I don't know about you, but for me, it's like now you have to go through many thousands more before you find that good one.
Totally. And you have to because I go to estate sales a lot because I have no life, and I argue with these people. They want hundreds of dollars for 200, 300 photographs, and I'm like, dude, you're not gonna look at them at all. They're gonna sit here, and you're not gonna get any money from them. Just give them to me now. Blink my eyes, lean over a little bit, and I usually get it. But have the fun. Sorry, I just came from work. I have all this energy right now. But that's half the fun is searching for these. I feel like that's half the reason why I love found photography, because you are searching through all of these other photographs and you get this one that's the best, which is one of my favorite. It's just so, it just reaches you and speaks to you. And you do have this relationship with this person that you have no idea. And it's really comforting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's the last question.
Awesome.
There's some great discussion here, and I definitely want to continue that discussion. We do have a panel discussion on photography in the vernacular. We're going to have curators and artists, including Jeff, Allison Grant, Greg Harris, and Pepper Kelly will moderate from Filter Photo. That's going to be on June 19th, here again on a Thursday night at 6:30. So about a month from now, and then we'll have a couple screenings, Vivian Maier Mystery, the BBC documentary to sort of go along with what's out now is Finding Vivian Maier is going to be screening here. So grab one of these. There's also another screening about other people's pictures. Somebody brought up the fact that people do collect these photos from flea markets and sell and trade them all the time. This documentary was put out a few years ago. It's really interesting. I encourage you guys to see that. So thanks again to Jeff.
Thank you.
And